Hi, and welcome to Documents and Drafts, the podcast where we look at some important historic documents, especially important in the United States, drink some really cool beer along the way, and talk about some other things as well. We should have some fun today. So today we're going to use um, the book Our Nation's Archives. We're going to look at the Judiciary Act of 1789 and George Washington's first inaugural. Sorry, let's do it this way. We're going to look at George Washington's first inaugural address. We're going to drink some Alesmith Nut Brown. We're going to look at the Judiciary Act of 1789. We're going to look at for some SCOTUS cases. And don't forget, we'll have some thank yous along the way. All right, so here we go. Return to meeting. Share screen. We need this screen here. And we're going to start with the Federal Judiciary Act. This is also from, I'm going to put up on the screen from the National Archives. So we're going to kind of use both kinds of backgrounds. So we're going to read from the book. Well, we're just going to use Our Nation's Archives this time and go from there. All right. Sorry, I'm not supposed to have pauses during this, but okay, there we are. All right. This is from Our Nation's Archive, or the National Archives website, archives.gov. Here, one of the first acts of the new Congress was establish, that's not the right one. Here we go. President George W. Bush's first inaugural speech. Although not required by the Constitution, George Washington presented the first presidential inaugural address on April 13, 1789. So it is required, but anyway. On April 16, 1789, 2 days after receiving official notification of his election, George Washington left his home on the Potomac for New York, accompanied by Charles Thompson, his official escort, and Colonel David Humphreys, his aide. He traveled through Alexandria, Baltimore, Wilmington, Philadelphia, Trenton, Princeton, New Brunswick, and Bridgetown. At these and other places along his route, the artillery roared a salute of honor, and citizens and officials presented him with marks of affection and honor, so that his trip became a triumphant process. On April 23rd, he crossed the bay from Bridgetown to New York in a magnificent barge especially built for the occasion. Lacking precedent to guide them in their preparations for the first presidential inaugural address, Congress appointed a joint committee to consider the time, place, and manner in which to administer to the president the oath of office required by the Constitution. Certain difficulties in planning and arrangements arose from the fact that Congress was meeting in New York's former City Hall, rechristened Federal Hall, which was in process of renovation under the direction of Pierre Lafont. On April 25th, Congress adopted the Joint Committee's recommendation that the inaugural ceremonies be held the following Thursday, April 30th, and that the official oath of office be administered to the president in the representatives' chamber. The final report of the committee slightly revised this plan with its recommendation that the oath be administered in the outer gallery adjoining the Senate chamber, to the end that the oath may be administered to the president in the most public manner. On Inauguration Day, the city was crowded with townspeople and visitors, blah, blah, blah. At Federal Hall, Vice President John Adams, the Senate and the House awaited the president's arrival in the Senate chamber. Before the assembled crowd of spectators, Livingston Chancellor administered the oath of office. Except for taking the oath required no further ceremonies, but upon re-entering the Senate chamber, the president read the address that's featured here, which we're getting here right now. All right, so here we go. Wait, I missed something. Scroll back up. This is like it's live. It says, I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. After repeating this oath, Washington kissed the Bible held to him by the Chancellor, called out, Long live George Washington, President of the United States, and a salvo of 13 cannons discharged. Now, supposedly he said, so help me God, but that's not listed there. Here's the transcript of his first inaugural address. Fellow citizens of the Senate and of the House of Representatives, among the vicissitudes incident to life, no event could have filled me with greater anxieties than that of which the notification was transmitted by your order and received on the 14th day of the present month. On the one hand, I was summoned by my country, whose voice I can never hear but with veneration and love, from a retreat which I had chosen with the fondest predilection, and in my flattering hopes with an immutable decision as the asylum of my declining years, a retreat which was rendered every day more necessary, as well as more dear to me by the addition of habit to inclination and to frequent interruptions in my health, to the gradual waste committed on it by time. On the other hand, the magnitude and difficulty of the trust to which the voice of my country called me, being sufficient to awaken the wisest and most experienced of her citizens, a distrustful scrutiny into his qualifications, could not but overwhelm with despondence the one who ought to be peculiarly conscious of his own deficiencies. In this conflict of emotions, all I dare aver is that it has been my faithful study to collect my duty from a just appreciation of every circumstance by which it might be affected. All I dare hope is that if in executing this task, I have been too much swayed by a grateful remembrance of the former instances or by an affectionate sensibility to this transcendent proof of the confidence of my fellow citizens, and have thence too little consulted my incapacities as well as disinclination for the weighty and untried cares before me, my error will be palliated by the motives which misled me, and its consequences be judged by which my country with some share of the partiality in which they originated. Such being the oppression under which I have, in obedience to the public summons, repaired to the present station, it will be peculiarly improper to admit in the first official act my fervent supplication to the Almighty Being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose provincial aids can supply every human defect, and his benediction may consecrate to the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States a government instituted by themselves for those essential purposes, and may enable every instrument employed in its administration to execute with success the functions allotted to his charge. In tendering this homage to the great author of every public and private good, I assure myself that it expresses your sentiments not less than my own, nor those of my fellow citizens at large less than either. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than those of the United States. Every step by which they have advanced to their character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. And in the important revolution just accomplished in the system of their united government, the tranquil deliberations and voluntary consent of so many distinct communities from which the events have resulted cannot be compared with the means by which governments have been established without some return of pious gratitude, along with a humble anticipation of the future blessings which the past seems to presage. These reflections arising out of the present crisis have forced themselves too strongly on my mind to be suppressed. You will join with me, I trust, in thinking that there are none under the influence of which the proceedings of a new and free government can be more auspiciously commenced. By the articles establishing the executive department, it is made the duty of the president to recommend to your consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. The circumstances under which I now meet you will acquit me from entering into that subject further than to refer to the greater constitutional charter under which you are assembled, and which, in defining your powers, designates the objects to which your attention is to be given. It will be more consistent with these circumstances and far more congenial with the feelings which actuate me to substitute in place of a recommendation of particular measures the tribute that is due to the talents, the rectitude, and the patriotism which adorn the characters selected to devise and adopt them. In these honorable qualifications, I behold the surest pledge that on one side no local prejudices or attachments, no separate views, nor party animosities will misdirect the comprehensive and equal eye which ought to watch over this great assemblage of communities and interests. So on one another, that the foundation of our national policy will be laid in the purest and immutable principles of private morality, and the preeminence of free government be exemplified by all the attributes which can win the affections of its citizens and command the respect of the world. I dwell on this prospect with every satisfaction with which an ardent love for my country can expire, since there's no truth more thoroughly established than there exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness, between duty and advantage, between the genuine maxims of an honest and magnanimous policy and the solid reward of public prosperity, and felicity. Since we ought not to be no less persuaded that the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and the right which heaven itself has ordained. And since the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty, the destiny of the Republican model of government are justly considered, perhaps as deeply as finally staked on the experiment entrusted in the hands of the American people. Besides the ordinary objects submitted to your care, it will remain with you the judgment to decide how far an exercise of the occasional power delegated by the fifth article of the Constitution is rendered expedient at the present juncture by the nature of objections which have been urged against the system, or by the degree of inquietude which has given birth to them. Instead of undertaking particular recommendations on this subject, in which I could be guided by no lights derived from official opportunities, I shall again give way to my entire confidence in your discernment in pursuit of the public good. For I assure myself that whilst you carefully avoid every alteration which might endanger the benefits of a united and effective government, or which ought to await the future lessons of experience, a reverence for the characteristics, rights of freemen, and a regard for the public harmony will sufficiently influence your deliberations on that question, how far the former can be impregnably fortified, or the latter be safely and advantageously promoted. To that preceding observation, I have one to add, which will be the most properly addressed to the House of Representatives. It concerns myself and will therefore be as brief as possible. When I first was honored with a call into my service of my country, then on the eve of an arduous struggle for its liberties, the light which I contemplated my service to my country, my duty required that I should renounce every pecuniary compensation. From this resolution, I have in no instance departed, and still being under the oppression which produced it, I must decline as inapplicable to myself any share in the personal emoluations which may be indispensably included in a permanent provision for the executive department, and must accordingly pray that pecuniary estimates for this station for which I am placed made during my continuance, and it be limited to such actual expenditures as the public may be thought to require. Having thus imparted to you my sentiments as they have been awakened by the occasion which brings us together, I shall take my present leave, but not without resorting to once more, the benign parent of the human race, in a humble supplication that since he has been pleased to favor the American people with the opportunities for deliberating in perfect tranquility and dispositions for deciding with unparalleled unanimity in the form of government for the security of their union and the advancement of their happiness, so his divine blessing may be equally conspicuous in the enlarged views and the temperate consultations and the wise measures on which the success of a government must depend. Whew. George Washington's first inaugural address. Time for some Alesmith. That's what we're going to talk about next. All right, so again, that was George Washington. Here's a little bit about Alesmith Brewing. We are drinking the Nut Brown, which on the can it says, Nut Brown is a tribute to one of our favorite English styles, deep mahogany in color with rich notes of biscuit and cocoa, a creamy mouthful, and full-bodied further flavor, blah, blah, blah. All right. So here's a little bit about them. Where are we? Visit us, beer, cider, cocktails, company. Here's their story. Alesmith was founded with a passion and respect for brewing in 1995. Alesmith continues to be recognized as one of the world's foremost craft breweries on the strength of numerous awards generated at prestigious local and national international competitions. Consistently ranked in the world's top 10 lists on the consumer-generated website, ratebeer.com, Alesmith's currently ranked number 6 out of the 33,000 breweries worldwide. Family-owned and community-minded, Alesmith celebrates diversity, charity, and a desire to deliver world-class beer with 5-star service to our customers. So they started in 1995. They brewed in 1998. They started brewing a Belgian Golden Strong ale called Horny Devil, and it won an award. 2002, Change of Hands. Grandmaster Judge and decorated home brewer Peter Zine takes ownership. They started barrel aging beers. 2008 is awarded Small Brewing Company Brewer of the Year, the Great American Beer Festival. 2012, new image, new bottle, or same recipes. So they keep expanding. By the way, all the music is provided by Soundstripe. So let's get back to that. Okay, and so they're 25 years old. So let's look at their beers. Here's their year-round beers. Party Tricks IPA. Let's view all their beers. I'm going to do that. Let's see. Party Tricks IPA, 394 Pale Ale, Alesmith Anvil Pilsner, Speedway Stout. Those are the year-round. So check out their website, alesmith.com. The one I'm having, the Nut Brown, is really good. So make sure you check that out. All right, the other document we're going to look at today, we're also going to use National Archives website, is the Federal Judiciary Act of 1789. Here's the background. One of the first acts of the new Congress was to establish a federal court system through the Judiciary Act signed by President Washington on September 24th, 1789. The founders of the new nation believed that establishing The founders of a new nation believed that establishment of a national judiciary was one of their most important tasks. In Article 3 of the Constitution of the United States, the provision that deals with the judicial branch is markedly smaller than Articles 1 and 2. Sorry, when the wife texts, you got to take care of it. Which created the legislative and executive branches. The generality of Article 3 of the Constitution raises questions that Congress had to address in the Judiciary Act of 1789. These questions had no easy answers, and the solutions to them were achieved politically. First, Congress decided that it could regulate the jurisdiction of all federal courts, and in the Judiciary Act of 1789, Congress established with great particularity limited jurisdiction for the district and circuit court, gave the Supreme Court the original jurisdiction provided in the Constitution, and granted the court appellate jurisdiction in cases from federal circuit courts and from state courts where these court rulings had rejected federal claims. The decision to grant federal courts a jurisdiction more restrictive than that allowed by the Constitution represented a recognition by Congress that the people of the United States would not find a full-blown federal court system palatable at that time. For nearly all of the next century, the judicial system remained essentially as established by the Judiciary Act of 1789. Only after the court had expanded across the continent, by the way, it's not 100% true, but we'll get to that in a minute. Only after the country had expanded across the continent had it been torn apart by civil war were major changes made. A separate tier of appellate circuit courts created in 1891 removed the burden of the circuit court from the shoulder of the Supreme Court justices, but otherwise left intact the judicial structure. With minor adjustments, it is the same system we have today. Congress has continued to build on the interpretation of the draftage of the first Judiciary Act and exercising a discretionary power to expand or restrict federal court jurisdiction. While opinions as to what constitutes the proper balance of federal and state concerns vary no less today than they did 2 centuries ago, The fact that today's federal court system closely resembles that to the one created in 1789 suggests that the first Congress performed the job admirably. All right, here's the transcript of that document. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that the Supreme Court of the United States shall consist of a Chief Justice and 5 associate justices, any 4 of whom shall be a quorum. They shall hold annually at the seat of government 2 sessions, one commencing the first Monday of February and the other the first Monday of August. That the associate justices shall have precedence according to the date of their commissions, or when the commissions of 2 or more of them bear date on the same date according to their respective age. And be it further enacted, the United States shall be and hereby are divided into 13 districts to be limited in calls as follows, to wit, I'm not going to read all the districts. And be it further enacted that there be a court called a district court, and each of the aforementioned courts to consist of 1 judge who shall reside in the district for which he is appointed, and shall be called a district judge, and shall hold annually 4 sessions. The first of which is commenced as follows. And we're not going to talk about the dates. We'll get through that. Be it further enacted that before mentioned districts, except those of Maine and Kentucky, shall be divided into 3 circuits, and each be called the Eastern, Middle, and Southern Circuits. The Eastern Circuit shall consist of, and again, it's just, so I'm trying to get through some of this stuff. It's not necessary. And be it further enacted that the first session of said circuit courts in the several districts shall commence at the times following. And again, it gives all the times following. And be it further enacted, the Supreme Court may at any more of its justices be present, be adjourned from day to day until a quorum be convened. And then a circuit court may also be adjourned from day to day by any one of its judges if none are present, by the marshal of the district until a quorum is convened, and that a district court, in the case of inability of the judge to attend at the commencement of a session, may by virtue of a written order from the said judge directed to the marshal of the district be adjourned by the said marshal to such a day antecedent to the next stated session of the said court, and the said court. So that's just about when, okay? The district court shall have the power to appoint clerks to their respective courts, and that the clerk for each district court shall be clerk also of the circuit court in such districts, and each said court should. So that's about appointments of clerks of court. And be it further enacted that the justices of the Supreme Court and the district court prefer to execute the duties of their respective office to take an oath. I do solemnly swear to affirm that I will administer justice without respect to persons and do equally right to the poor and to the rich, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent on me as, according to the best of my abilities and understanding, agreeably to the Constitution and the laws of the United States, so help me God. And be it further enacted that the district court shall have, exclusive of the courts of the several states, cognizance of all crimes and offenses that shall be cognizable under the authority of the United States, committed within their respective districts or upon the high seas, or no other punishment than whipping not exceeding 30 stripes, a fine not exceeding $100, and a term of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months is to be inflicted. It shall also have exclusive original cognizance of all civil causes of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, including all seizures under law of impost, navigation, or trade of the United States, where the seizures are made on water which are navigable from the sea by vessels of 10 or more tons berthed with their respective districts as well upon the high seas, saving to suitors in all cases the right of common law remedy where the common law is competent to give it, and shall have the exclusive original cognizance of all seizures on land or other waters as aforesaid made, and of all suits for penalties and forfeitures incurred under the laws of the United States. It shall also have cognizance concurrent with the courts of the several states or the circuit courts, as the case may be, of all causes where an alien sues for a tort only in violation of the law of the nations or a treaty of the United States. It shall have cognizant concurrent, as last mentioned, of all suits at common law where the United States sue in a matter in dispute amounts exclusive of costs to the sum value of $100, and shall have the jurisdiction exclusive of the courts of the several states of all suits against consuls or vice consuls, except for offenses above the description aforesaid, in the trial of the issue of the fact in the district court, in all causes except civil causes of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. And be it further enacted, the district court in Kentucky shall, besides the jurisdiction aforesaid, have jurisdiction of all other causes except of appeals and writs of error herein made cognizable in a circuit court, and shall proceed therein in the same manner as the circuit court, and writs of errors and appeals shall lie from the decisions therein to the Supreme Court in the same causes as from the circuit court to the Supreme Court under the same regulations. And be it further enacted that the circuit court shall have original cognizance concurrent with the courts of the several states of all suits of a civil nature, common law, or in equal equity, where the matter in dispute exceeds, exclusive of all costs, of some value of $500. In the United States, or plaintiff or petitioners or an alien is party, or the suit between a citizen of the state where the suit is brought and a citizen of another state. And there's more stuff about civil suits. Be it further enacted that the suit be commenced in any state court against an alien or by a citizen of the state in which the suit is brought against. Okay, this is really long, so I'm going to shorten it. That there's just inspections of jurisdictions and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to read the full text, because it's a lot, go to the National Archives or go to the book, Our Nation's Archives, The History of the United States and Documents, and check out the Judiciary Act of 1789. Again, we are listening to music from Soundstrop. We are drinking Alesmith Nut Brown. Really good. After all that reading, I need one. Well, let's see where we are time-wise. Okay, good. We got time. So there's a very famous case. It kind of changes the Judiciary Act of 1789. And it's called Marbury v. Madison. So here it is. This is from oea.org. We're going to look at some other cases too, but here it is. Thomas Jefferson defeated John Adams in the 1800 presidential election. Before Jefferson took office on March 4th, 1801, Adams and Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1801, which created new courts and added judges, which gave the presidential more. It's actually 1789, but whatever. The act was essentially an attempt by Adams and his party to frustrate his successor, as he used the act to appoint 16 new circuit judges and 42 new justices of the peace. The appointees were approved by the Senate, but they would not be valid under the commission until their commissions were delivered by the Secretary of State. William Marbury had been appointed Justice of the Peace in the District of Columbia, but his commission was never delivered. Marbury petitioned the Supreme Court to compel the new Secretary of State, James Madison, to deliver the documents. Marbury, joined by 3 others, similarly situated appointees, petitioned for a writ of mandamus compelling the delivery of the commissions. Jefferson basically told Madison, don't deliver the commissions when he took office. And so Madison didn't deliver. So the questions were, do the plaintiffs have a right to receive their commissions? Can they sue for their commissions in court? And does the Supreme Court have the authority in order to deliver their commissions? Here's the discussion, and this is why Marshall is considered one of the greatest Chief Justices ever. The court found that Madison's refusal to deliver the commission was illegal, but did not order Madison to hand over Marbury's commission via writ of mandamus. Instead, the court held that that provision of the Judiciary Act of 1789 enabling Marbury to bring his claim to the Supreme Court was in itself unconstitutional, since he purported to extend to the court's original jurisdiction beyond that which Article 3, Section 2 established. Marshall expanded that a writ of mandamus was the proper way to seek a remedy, but concluded that the court could not issue it. Marshall reasoned that the Judiciary Act of 1789 conflicted with the Constitution. Congress did not have the power to modify the Constitution, though through regular legislation, because the supremacy clause places the Constitution before other laws. In so holding, Marshall established the principle of judicial review, i.e., the power to declare law unconstitutional. All that came from the Judiciary Act of 1789, and then the Marbury v. Madison case of 1803. So we're going to look at 2 other cases. I think we'll save. We're going to go to, again, this is from oea.org. We're going to go to the next court term. By the way, if you go to the Wayback Machine, I think I've done Marbury v. Madison before. We are going to look at ex parte Crow Pig, once I find it, and ex parte McCardle. So here's ex parte Crow Pig. In August 1881, a Native American named Consishunka, Crow Dog in English, shot and killed another Native American on the Great Sioux Reservation in present-day South Dakota. The Sioux tribal government convicted Crow Dog, I don't know why I said Crow Pig, Crow Dog, and applying traditional Sioux law, ordered him to pay restitution to the victim's family. The government also of the Dakota Territory also charged Crow Dog with murder. And after being found guilty, Crow Dog was sentenced to death. Crow Dog appealed for a writ of habeas corpus and argued that the federal court lacked jurisdiction, pointing to an 1834 act that specifically excluded crimes committed by one Native American on another from federal jurisdiction. The government argued that an 1868 treaty with the Sioux that required the tribe surrender criminals to the United States superseded that earlier statute. Here's the constitutional question. Did federal law grant the Dakota Territory court jurisdiction over the murder for which Crow Dog was convicted? In a unanimous 9-0 decision, authored by Stanley Justice Matthews, the court concluded that Congress had not granted federal courts jurisdiction over the murder of one Native American by another. The court interpreted the 1968 treaty stipulation that criminals be surrendered to the federal government in context, and given that the treaty was made between two parties, the party of whites and their allies, and tribe of Indians, concluded the provision did not conflict with or repeal the 1834 law. Justice Matthews' opinion goes on to note that while the law is clearly conflicted on the question because the 1834 law was never expressly repealed, there was no positive repugnancy between the provisions of the new laws and those of the old that would entail an implied repeal. Again, all the music is provided by Soundstripe. All right, so that is ex parte Crow Dog. Now we are going to look at ex parte McCardle. This is from 1869. Facts of the case. In 1867, William McCardle was arrested by military authorities for publishing a series of editorials criticizing the Reconstruction in his Mississippi newspaper. McCardle sought a writ of habeas corpus on the grounds that the Reconstruction Acts under which he was arrested were unconstitutional. The judge sent him back into custody, finding the military actions legal under Congress's law. McCardle appealed to the Supreme Court under an 1867 congressional statute that conferred jurisdiction on appeal to the High Court. After hearing arguments in the case, but prior to announcing a decision, Congress withdrew its 1867 act conferring jurisdiction. So the question was, may Congress withdraw jurisdiction from the High Court after jurisdiction has been given? The conclusion was Congress validated congressional withdrawal from the court's jurisdiction. The basis for this repeal was the exceptions clause of Article 3, Section 2. But Chase pointedly reminded his readers that the 1868 statute repealing jurisdiction does not affect the jurisdiction which was previously exercised. So that's ex parte McCardle. Where are we on time? Okay. Got about 6 minutes, so we're going to go to SCOTUS Ball. We'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of that. So let's see. I have announcement of opinions on Wednesday, January 14th. So let's look at the opinion announcements. Live chat. Oh, never mind. Can't do that. Let's see what we got going on here. Here's court news. Is what I want. Let's see. Here's court news for today. Court finds police properly entered a man's home despite absence of a warrant. Supreme Court appears up likely to uphold the transgender athlete ban. There was oral arguments for that today. Bear court majority sides with federal inmate on questions of habeas procedures. Court hears arguments in suit attempting to find companies responsible for damage to the Louisiana coast. The court to consider an extent in which New Jersey Transit can be held liable for injuries in other states. Supreme Court agrees to hear cases on violations of international law. That should be interesting. Okay. We already know that they heard the transgender athlete case. Court to hear arguments in case seeking to hold company. We already know that. Okay. So that's the court news. So we're kind of done with that. So today, so today we used our nation's archives, the history of the United States in documents. We also used National Archives website, archives.gov. We read George Washington's first inaugural address. We talked about Alesmith Brewing, and we're drinking Alesmith Nut Brown. Very good. We read most of the Judiciary Act of 1789 because it's just too flipping long to fit in a 40-minute window. We looked at Marbury v. Madison, which actually struck down provisions of the Judiciary Act of 1789. We looked at Ex parte Crow Dog and Ex parte McCardle. We went through some current happenings at the Supreme Court. And here's just a little personal reflection before I give you my thank yous. How do I phrase this without getting myself into hot water, since this is normally apolitical? Here's what I'm going to tell you. I believe Maduro needed to be taken out of Venezuela. Venezuela has been floundering for 25 years. It should be one of the wealthiest countries on the planet. It's not. The Venezuelans were celebrating. The friend of a friend's wife is Venezuelan, and she was happy. Probably the right thing to do. Don't know if we did it the right way. There were warrants out for his arrest, so we're gonna go from there. I find the oil tanker thing more interesting because I believe that Russia and Russia and Iran especially were laundering oil through Venezuela to make money, which because of the sanctions on them. ICE. I'm not a fan of the way ICE is going about their business. Do I think there are people here who are abusing the system, refusing to assimilate, and importing their values instead of ours that should be removed? Yes. Am I a fan of immigration? Yes. I think that, I'm a seventh great grandson of an immigrant. But we became Americans. It seems that there are certain, and it's a small percentage, that are refusing to Americanize. Yeah, if you're creating asylum, if you're asking for asylum from a country, and you come here and you bring that country with you and you go vacation to that country, no, you're abusing the system. Go home. Fraud. I think all federal government programs are rampant with fraud, and I think they should be audited, they should be streamlined, and they should take care of the people that actually need taken care of. Do we need a lot of the federal programs? Yes. Is the system rampant for abuse? Yes. Do we need to fix it? Yes. Are we going about it the right way? No, probably not. So that's my current take. All right. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the thank yous. Real quick. Podcast is available on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podcast Addict, and other platforms. Music's provided by Soundstripe. The books used are Our Nation's Archive, edited by Eric Brun and Jay Crosby. Sometimes the 50 core documents by the Ashbrook Press. Today we used archives.gov. The pictures of George Washington's Supreme Court image provided by Getty. SCOTUS information on scotusblog.com and oia.org. The cover art created by Emma Williams, and the YouTube technical director for me is Olivia Baldwin. And you can find the beer at alesmith.com. Hope you guys have a great time. Talk to you soon and see you next time.